What's the quote? Out of purpose before anybody had an opinion. You know, that thing is still true.
My takeaway on Jalen Hurts is I don't think he's a franchise quarterback.
Could the Eagles be all in on Jalen Hurts?
No, because Skip, I don't see a guy that's good enough that can lead you to where you want to go, which is the Super Bowl. He just lacks the necessary tools.
I don't think Jalen Hurts is their quarterback for the future. It's a franchise quarterback that you're going to stick with and say, I'm going to go win a Super Bowl.
You know, Jalen Hurts is, I respect a lot about Jalen Hurts, but I think Jalen Hurts is also like the most overrated player in football. All right?
Carson Wentz is healthy. You ain't even thinking about Jalen Hurts as the quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Jalen Hurts has been labeled as overrated and had his abilities as a quarterback underestimated by fans and media alike. But he has never let that determine the type of player, teammate, and man that he wanted to be. Every champion has a journey, and every underdog has a story. Jalen Hurts' path to the top of the football world is one that should be talked about for years to come. From his days at Alabama to his transfer to Oklahoma, this man has had a journey that could impact a generation of talented athletes who have been written off by many. And honestly, I think we have only caught a glimpse of what this man has in store. Let's talk about it. In January of 2016, Jalen Hurts arrived at Alabama early for spring camp, getting a head start on learning that Alabama offense. Coming out of Channelview High School, Jalen was the #1 dual threat quarterback of the 2016 class, and he eventually ended up making history as the first true freshman to start at quarterback for the University of Alabama under Nick Saban. And might I say, he was very impressive during that freshman season. Finishing the season 13-1, he showed a lot of poise, he showed his athleticism, and it made Jalen Hurts a great dual threat quarterback with a great arm, and he used his legs very well. And he ended up leading the Tide to a national championship appearance, losing to a Deshaun Watson-led Clemson team. You remember that guy? In 2017, as a sophomore, Jalen Hurts led Alabama to an 11-1 regular season record, making it to the college football playoff as the #4 seed, where they would go on to play #1 Clemson, and they would end up winning 24-6, and Jalen Hurts was named the offensive MVP of this game. During the national championship game, things would take a turn for the worse for Jalen Hurts when he was benched at halftime for true freshman Tua Tagovailoa. Tua came out at halftime and ended up leading the Tide to a second-half victory to capture the national title. And it seemed like this would raise questions on who the starting quarterback would be for the Tide going into the 2018 season. While Tua would end up eventually being named the starter after the second week of the season, Jalen Hurts could have gave up on himself and quit at a point like this. Especially with the state of college football in today's current climate, it's easy for these kids to just leave when things don't go their way. But not Jalen. He kept his head down for the remainder of that season. He remained humble and hungry, and he stayed in the rotation, getting some type of playing time during the season, remaining the backup for most of the season. But eventually, his time would come again. Fate would end up coming full circle for Jalen when Tua ended up going down in the SEC championship game versus Georgia. Jalen came off of the bench and ended up leading the Tide to an SEC championship victory. And it was a story of redemption, heart, and unshaken character. This let Jalen have a chance to show the entire world he could still be a guy. And it wouldn't be long before Jalen got that opportunity. He graduated from Alabama in December of 2018, and in January of 2019, with his chapter closed at Alabama, Jalen announced that he would be transferring to the University of Oklahoma as a grad transfer. And under head coach Lincoln Riley, he got the chance to play right away, and he showed that he could still be a top starting quarterback. Jalen Hurts led the Sooners to a Big 12 title, and they earned a spot in the college football playoffs. And after a very successful season, finishing with 3,851 passing yards, 32 passing touchdowns, and 8 interceptions, while he also had an amazing 1,298 rushing yards with 20 touchdowns. Jalen became a Heisman finalist, finishing as the runner-up behind Joe Burrow, and he proved his ability as an elite passer and a top-tier dual-threat leader. While they would go on to lose to that same LSU team, Jalen showed that he was ready for the NFL. And as a senior ready to enter the draft, Jalen received that Lamar Jackson treatment going into the combine. Everybody was suggesting that he should change positions But Jalen insisted that he is a quarterback first and that he would go into the combine as a quarterback with his desire to be a starter in the NFL. And in the 2020 NFL draft, Jalen Hurts was drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles in the second round with the 53rd pick. Initially, he was seen as a backup to then franchise quarterback Carson Wentz. He didn't even receive the backup spot to start the season. He would gain the backup spot after week 2 so he could be used on quarterback runs and more of a decoy for the Eagles. But Jalen Hurts wasn't content with being a backup. He remained hungry and diligent on capitalizing on the moment when his time arrived. And when his time did come, he seized the opportunity. And on December 6, 2020, as Carson Wentz was stinking up the joint, Jalen was brought in as a change of pace and Carson Wentz got benched. And going into the next week versus the Saints, Jalen Hurts was named the full-time starter. And with a full week of prep, it was time for us to see what Jalen Hurts could do for the Eagles. And he managed to deliver a win for those guys. He finished 17-30 with 1 touchdown and 1 interception, while also racking up 18 rushes for 106 yards. And he would go on to start the remaining 3 games to end the season. While they didn't win any of those 3 games, he eventually ended up being benched during the final game for Nate Sudfeld, a move that not only pissed off the Giants, who needed the Eagles to defeat Washington for a chance at the playoffs, but it pissed off fans and even players. And I think this is the main reason that caused Doug Peterson to get fired on January 21st, 2021. And going into the 2021 season, the Eagles would sign Nick Sirianni to be their new head coach. And they would draft Devontae Smith with the 10th pick, reuniting him with his former Alabama teammate. During training camp, Jalen was named the Eagles' full-time starter, and all of his hard work, leadership, grit, and playmaking ability earned him the respect of his teammates and coaches. And in his first year as the starter, he managed to lead the Eagles to a winning season. They ended up going 9-8 while also making the playoffs. They would eventually end up losing to the defending champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but Jalen finished the season with 3,114 passing yards, 16 passing touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. But he would also lead all quarterbacks in rushing yards and touchdowns with 784 rushing yards and 10 touchdowns. And it seemed like the Eagles had found their guy and were willing to do whatever they could to support him. During the 2022 offseason, the Eagles would do just that by trading for star receiver A.J. Brown from the Titans, and this would be the start of something historic. The Eagles would go on to start 8-0 during the 2022 season, making Hurts the first quarterback to ever lead the Eagles to this hot of a start, and they would keep smoking, finishing the season 14-3 going into the playoffs as the top seed in the NFC. And Jalen Hurts would finish the season 14-1 as the starter. He also finished as the MVP runner-up behind Patrick Mahomes. The time had come for Jalen to show what he was made of during those 2022 playoffs. And the Eagles would go on to dominate the Giants in the divisional, beat the 49ers in the conference game en route to a Super Bowl matchup versus the Kansas City Chiefs. And we ended up watching a banger, an all-time classic battle. The Eagles were going to lose to the Chiefs 38-35, but Jalen Hurts put the world on notice, and he kept this loss in the back of his head for years to come. All of the hard work and perseverance ended up paying off for Jalen Hurts, coming off of his second straight playoffs and leading the Eagles to a Super Bowl appearance. He proved to Philly he was their guy for years to come. And during that 2023 offseason, Jalen Hurts became the highest paid quarterback in the NFL history at the time, agreeing to a 5-year deal, $255 million contract extension, including $126.5 million guaranteed. And he became the first ever Eagles player with a no-trade clause. 2 years later, the Eagles shocked the world by signing star running back Saquon Barkley from the division rival New York Giants. And little did we know at the time just how impactful this would be for the Eagles team. We already knew they had a lot of weapons, but we did not think they would put it together this fast. And in the 2024 season, Jalen Hurts did what every player dreams of. He led the Eagles on a magical Super Bowl run. The Eagles finished the regular season 14-3 again. The Saquon Barkley trade put this offense on another level. Their running game turned into an unstoppable force. Saquon had 14 games with 100 rushing yards. Still having the threat of Jalen Hurts' legs, the tush push, and two dominant receivers in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, the Eagles would be one of the favorites coming out of the NFC. And they tore through the NFC, beating the Packers in the wild card, beating the Rams in the divisional, and destroying the division rival Commanders in the conference title game. And Super Bowl 59 ended up being Jalen Hurts' defining moment so far in his career. On the grandest stage with the world watching, Jalen led his team like he had done many times before, with poise, determination, and unwavering confidence. And he showed that get back is indeed a must. The Eagles would go on to dominate the Chiefs, leaving no stone unturned, showing everybody why it was their time at the top. Jalen Hurts' rise to the top of the football mountain will be studied. People will write you off, people will throw dirt on your name, but at the end of the day, your purpose is yours, and you have to go out there and make shit happen. As a man, as a leader, and as a player of character with tons of confidence, Jalen Hurts has become a model of hard work and dedication for future stars to come. Who doesn't love a good underdog story?